Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 11 of Inside the Club. I'm Belle Fraser, the Utah Hockey Club beat reporter for the Salt Lake Tribune and the host of the podcast. This week is going to be a solo episode. I hope people don't mind. It was a crazy travel week getting back from the road trip and then going right into games at Delta Center, so a little bit off schedule here. So we'll just do a Q&A. I went on Twitter and gathered questions from fans about the team, topics that they are kind of curious about. So I'll go through and answer those today, and then we will be back to regularly scheduled guests next week. Apologies for the change up, but it's just how it worked out this week. So we can start with the questions now. Thank you everyone who submitted. If I didn't get to it, I'll still ask the players all the fun questions. We've just had limited practice time this week, so not a ton of open locker rooms to go around and get the fun answers like the swig orders or golf courses and stuff like that, but I will get on it. I can tweet those out or add them to the next podcast, but I'm going to go through, I think, 9 or 10 questions here and then follow up with the rest when I have the answers for you guys. So to start, the first question is, even if Utah misses the playoffs, what point total would you consider the season a success? For me, it's anything over 85 points. What are your predictions when it's all said and done? 85 points, I agree. I think that's a success. Looking back at last season with the Arizona Coyotes, they finished with 77 points. Utah, as of Sunday, March 23rd, that's when this is being recorded, so before Monday's game against the Detroit Red Wings, Utah has 75 points. So my best guess is that they're going to win at least 2 more games in the last 13 games of the season. So I think just having more points than they did last year is a plus, and also being in the mix consistently this late in the season. They haven't had huge losing streaks in the latter half, unlike last year. So I think that's a positive, and obviously improvements from last year is a good thing. I think if they weren't going to reach that 77-point mark, that would be concerning. And also, after you brought in the type of players you did, I think you would expect them to do better than last year. So I think that's definitely a good thing. And then I think it'll take more than 85 points to make the playoffs, though. And I don't think this team not making the playoffs this year marks the season as not successful. I think the fact that they've kept themselves in the mix for so long is successful. You know, they've been out by 6 points, and if they lose one more game, it'll be 8, and they've never let themselves slide that far. Right now, they're 4 points out. But the St. Louis Blues, who are in the second wildcard spot in the Western Conference, have 79 points right now, and they have 11 games left to play. They've had the best record in the NHL since the Four Nations break. I think they've gone 11-2-2. They've won 5 straight. So they already have 79 points. You can imagine they'll pick up at least 10 more. So I think if you're looking at what playoff success looks like in the standings, I think it'll be 90-plus points in the Western Conference. But again, I don't think that needs to hold fans back from feeling happy about the season Utah has had. Coach and all the players say it. If they're going to make the playoffs, it's going to be by a point. It's going to be by 2 points. It might be by a tiebreaker. So they're going to keep on pushing. But yeah, I agree. I think 85 is good. And if they can get to the 90s, then they might really be in the mix. So they also just need teams to start losing as well. Like we said, St. Louis has kind of been on fire, and no one in the Western Conference with the team they're chasing, like the Calgary Flames or the Vancouver Canucks, have kind of dropped off. So that's forced Utah to not be allowed to drop off either. But we'll see down the stretch. I think fans should be happy with what this team has done. Obviously, there's heartbreak in hockey when you miss the playoffs, when you lose a big game, but it's all part of the journey. And I think this team is really thinking bigger picture. It's not really make or break this season. They're happy to be in the position they are, but it's not a failure this year if they don't hit that 90-95 point mark. Okay, next question is a prospect question talking about bigger picture and looking to the future. Someone asked, can we expect Utah Hockey Club to sign Kipke? So that's defenseman Justin Kipke. He was a 5th-round pick of the Arizona Coyotes in 2023. 19 years old, so he's around the time when he could sign his entry level. I don't think, obviously, he will go straight to the NHL. I think he'll spend some time in Tucson for sure, but I think that's a guy that they definitely have their eye on this season. He has 62 points, 12 goals, 50 assists in 64 games with the Victoria Royals this season in the WHL. So obviously having a productive offensive season, but based on the notes and kind of following him this season, Utah has said that they want him to just be a bit more assertive defensively. And I think that's something that you see with young players, that sometimes if they don't have points, you're like, oh, they're not playing well, but that's not true, especially with defensemen. So I think he still needs to round out his game for sure. But Utah has the luxury that they don't need him immediately. They can give him the time and space he needs to develop right now, whether that's in the WHL or if he signs and spends some time in Tucson. Because when you look at Utah's back end next year, especially after they signed Ian Cole to a 1-year extension and Olli Maatta to a 3-year extension, Utah is set to have the 6 defensemen they already have right now, which is Mikhail Sergachev, John Marino, Sean Durzi, Olli Maatta, Michael Kessering, and Ian Cole. So they're not desperate to fill a gap right now. Robert Bertuzzo and Nick DeSimone are on expiring contracts. They're Utah's 2 extra defensemen right now. I personally don't see them getting extended. Maybe DeSimone gets a short extension. I imagine Robert Bertuzzo doesn't. He's dealt with injury this year and hasn't really been in the lineup for a few months. But it's not like they are going into next season needing a middle 4 defenseman. So I think that's a positive where it's great. Kipke's having a great season and he's, I imagine, going to be in Utah within the next few years. But they don't have to rush that process, especially when you look at who they already have in Tucson right now. They have Duda and Lamoureux especially, who Utah fans got to see this season, who got called up out of necessity when all of the injuries were happening, and he held his own. You know, he made his NHL debut way earlier than I think he expected and the organization expected, but that's another guy that if you need an extra body, and Artem Duda, they're probably going to get the call as well. And then Dmitry Simashev too. He's in the KHL, and that's been a player, a defenseman that this organization and fans have been extremely excited about for a while. It sounds like he could come over to the States after this season in the KHL. Nothing's confirmed yet, but I think they just have a pool of defensemen, of young defensemen that they're able to take their time with. And the reason they're able to do that, I was talking to Bill Armstrong this week about Mikhail Sergachev. He played Tampa for the first time, and he said when last summer they didn't really have any defensemen left, it was kind of Durzi and Kessling when they were coming into Utah, and he said he studied the Tampa Bay Lightning's model of trading for all of their top-tier defensemen who went out and won them championships, and that's what Bill Armstrong did through trade and signing. We talk about Olli Maatta, again, Sergachev traded for, Marino traded for, signed Ian Cole. So he's brought in top defensemen, steadfast defensemen that he can rely on for the next few years while he waits for those drafted defensemen to develop and be ready for the NHL level. And I think there was a question a while ago about how do different positions develop, and I think it just takes a bit longer for defensemen. You look at Dylan Guenther or Logan Cooley, and obviously they were very high draft picks, so you expect them to be ready a little bit earlier, but Utah has been able to rely on its youth in forward lines and forward players, but I think they feel comfortable with giving their prospect defensemen a little bit more time to marinate, you could say, and they have the big names to hold it down until those guys are ready and to hold it down until that transition happens. So yes, I could see them signing Kipke, but I don't think Utah fans will see him playing it on an NHL level for a few years. Okay, third question. Has Utah given up the most shorthanded goals this year? What is that attributed to? No, Utah has not. They're close. They're 4th most in the league, but the Boston Bruins, Tampa Bay Lightning, and San Jose Sharks have all given up more shorthanded goals. Boston Bruins have given up 9, I believe, and then the Lightning and Sharks have given up 8. Utah Hockey Club has given up 7. So not the worst in the league, but definitely not a stat that you want to be in the top 5 for. I think when you look at what it's attributed to, it's a couple things. If the power play isn't clicking, that's an obvious factor. Utah, in their game, who was it against? They went 0 for 4 on the power play recently, and I think you've seen their power play kind of fluctuate throughout the year, where sometimes they'll go out there and you kind of know they're going to score, especially that first unit with Dylan Gunther and Sergachev and Keller, and Cooley got moved back up there with Nick Schmaltz as well. And sometimes it's on fire. They've had games and stretches, I think 7 games in a row where they had a power play goal. And that's when you're really moving the puck around well. You're not stagnant. And that's part of the reason they put Cooley back on the first unit. Coach said was because they wanted more movement on that first unit. Barrett Hayton was there before, and he's great for face-offs and net front positioning and kind of getting those greasier goals. But with that, I think they weren't swinging the puck around as much, and they were overthinking, and that leads to two turnovers. So I think when you don't have confidence in your power play, or you feel like things aren't clicking, that can result in odd man rushes the other way. And you need to create space on the power play. I think that was the other thing. Utah wasn't dragging defensemen to the other sides or kind of shifting the ice on the power play, and that can just turn out to the opponent getting the puck from you and going the other way. Unfortunately, when you play someone like the Edmonton Oilers, everyone saw that shorthanded goal. It almost feels inevitable. Oilers are a really good team off the rush, as are a lot of Utah's recent opponents, and head coach Andre Chiarini has talked a lot about defending the rush and being ready for that and not having turnovers in your own end. So I think that's when you kind of see maybe the youth showing, or exhaustion almost, not to say it's an excuse, but this team has talked about every game being a game 7 for them. There's a lot of emotional highs and lows. They're playing every other night, fighting for their playoff lives. So I think you see lapses in their games where they're not going to play a perfect game every night, and unfortunately that means shorthanded goals against. But again, Tampa Bay has one of the best power plays in the league, and they're in the top 2 for shorthanded goals against. So it really just comes to breakdowns. I think it's miscues, it's mishandling of the puck, especially in the neutral zone. And then if an NHL player is one-on-one with a goalie, they have a good chance of scoring. Karel Vejmelka has been great, but he's definitely been left out to dry a handful of times this season. So that's definitely a part of it. Alex Kerfoot got a shorthanded goal against the Tampa Bay Lightning technically. They were shorthanded and it was an empty netter. So not the flashiest, but it still counts. But that's something that's definitely going to have to be tightened up for Utah down the stretch here. You can't give up those kinds of goals in tight games, and it takes the momentum out and obviously gets the other team going. So I don't think there's one reason. That's kind of an overview of why it might happen. But yeah, if they want to make a serious push right now, those are things they're going to have to limit. All right, next question is, what does a hockey beat reporter do during the off season? Still write. I will still have a lot of Utah Hockey Club content coming everyone's way. I think it'll be more features and enterprise stories, a little bit more in-depth about players or systems or storylines. They're opening the new practice facility in September, and Delta Center will start going under renovations this summer. So there will be a lot of non-on-the-ice hockey news that'll happen this year. They got here with 4 months and they just started playing. So I think this summer you'll see a lot of the things they weren't able to focus on when they first arrived in Utah get taken care of. So a lot of news around that. NHL draft will happen, and I'll have stories around who they drafted, talking to those players, what it means for the team, a lot of look-ahead stories. But yeah, it's going to be weird. I won't have a game to go to 5 times a week. There won't be practices. There'll be developmental camp in July, and then obviously training camp starts around late August. So I feel like the summer goes by a bit quicker when you have kind of those spots of coverage. But yeah, it won't be game stories. Probably go home for a little bit, but I promise to keep the Utah Hockey Club content coming. I won't disappear for the summer. And any story ideas that you guys have or might want me to do a deeper dive into this summer, I'm all ears. I kind of write for you. You're the audience. So whatever you guys want this summer, I'm happy to work on. Yeah, I'm excited to explore Utah a bit more too. Obviously, I got here and the season started, so I've seen a lot of hockey, but not a lot of the state. So it'll be nice to have some free time to do some more exploring as well. So if anyone has any recommendations of spring, summer activities in Utah, leave it in the comments, let me know, and I'll definitely get to those this summer as well. Okay, next question is, we are nearing the end of the first inaugural season, and some of us new fans still feel like there's a whole lot we don't know about the game. What's the best way to really dive into learning all the rules? Are there any websites or publications you'd recommend? This feels like a easy answer, or maybe not that helpful, but honestly, just watch as much hockey as you can, which I know all the Utah Hockey Club fans are doing. You guys have completely embraced this team in the NHL this season. I think watching other teams that aren't Utah can be helpful because you see different lines, different power plays, different systems, penalties and rules in those games that you're not used to maybe seeing with Utah because you're so familiar with the players and how they play and who's going to be out there and if they're going to take a too many men on the ice call. So I always think watching a game with two teams that you're not familiar with can definitely help because you start applying your knowledge that you know about Utah and how they play to different teams and you see the differences in it. And just I think the more you watch, the more it becomes a bit more natural. And that's how I really learned it, I feel like, just growing up watching hockey. You take in so much subconsciously that you might get to the end of the season and realize you know a lot more than you think you do. So, I would just say keep watching, watch different teams, and ask questions. I'm always here. I'm really excited that so many people want to know more about hockey and more about the team. So if anyone ever has specific questions just about how something works, don't be afraid to DM me or tweet at me or comment it, whatever. There's no silly question when it comes to learning a new sport. There are a lot of sports I don't know very well, but hockey I definitely do. So if there's anything you're curious about, I'm always here to answer. And there's some great beat reporters with Utah Hockey Club as well. I know everyone is really excited to help people get to know the sport more. So ask questions, and then I would say listen to podcasts. I appreciate everyone for listening to Inside the Club, but another podcast which people probably already know about is 32 Thoughts on Sportsnet with Elliot Friedman and Kyle Bukauskas. I feel that I learn something new every time I listen to them. They have their hockey encyclopedias in terms of histories and rules and kind of tidbits that you don't really think of. They have a great portion of the podcast called The Thought Line where people will submit kind of trivia questions for them to go through. So I always find that as a great hockey education, it's not about a specific team. It's looking at the full league. The podcast, they talk about all the different teams, all the different games. So that's another great way to learn the league. They talk about star players on teams in the Eastern Conference or teams that Utah doesn't play a lot. So I think that's a great one. There's Spit and Chicklets, which is kind of a less serious podcast, but they have great interviews as well. But I think just taking in as much content as you can and not being afraid to ask questions. And that's it. You're not going to know everything after the first season, but the exciting thing about this team is that fans can grow and learn the game as the team is learning and growing themselves. So everyone's doing a great job. And again, always here if there are any questions. All right. Next question is, the team is really solid right now, but where do you think our biggest holes are? And who do you think we could bring in during free agency to shore up those gaps? This is really interesting, especially because Utah was not super active at the trade deadline. They traded Shea Weber's contract to the Chicago Blackhawks, which people kind of found funny because it's like the 6th or 7th team Shea Weber's contract has gone to. He's not in the league anymore, but he's technically not retired, so it's an active contract. He still gets paid. There's 1 year left on it, and the Chicago Blackhawks are paying it. So what that did do was clear cap space for Utah Hockey Club. So they have projected $22.3 million in cap space this season, which they can do a lot with, especially because they didn't bring any big names in at the trade deadline. They're confident with the guys they have now, but I do believe that if they're going to be a legitimate contender and in the playoffs on a yearly basis, they need some strength up front in their top six. They need some scoring. I think they need a legitimate top six center. But first, they're going to have to use that money to sign their own guys, namely Logan Cooley. And Jack McBain is going to be a restricted free agent as well. So they have a lot more control with him. They can match any offer he gets if he gets offer sheeted. So And he'll obviously get a lot less money than Logan Cooley, but I think those are guys that they'll lock up this summer when they're thinking about how to use that money. But looking at unrestricted free agents going into the summer, there's been a lot of talk about Mitch Marner. And of course, there will be if someone like Mitch Marner is on the market. I think every team is going to put their hand in and kind of see what's going on and talk. It's funny, a lot of the NHL insiders and shows at the deadline were saying Utah could be a dark horse this summer just because of the amount of cap space they have and where the team is going. They're not going into a rebuild. They're not coming out of their prime. They're on an upward trajectory, so that could be attractive to a lot of players who want to win in the coming years and who could take on a bigger role. Kevin Stedland said he signed in Utah because he wanted to have a voice in the room and he didn't want to be, not that he was an extra forward in Florida, but he just wanted to have more of an important veteran presence for a young group of players, and that he has had this year. Same with Sergachev. He didn't choose to come to Utah, but he's really loves it, at least is what he's told us, and he came in and he turned into a number one defenseman, which is something he couldn't do in Tampa because he was behind Victor Hedman. So I think Utah is attractive in those ways, and also Ryan Smith has had a great first year as an owner in the NHL. The players and coaches and everyone have nothing but good things to say about him. So I think that's something that unrestricted free agents definitely look at as well, because there are a lot of unknowns around this team coming into the season. Is it going to work? Are players going to like playing there? And I think now that those questions are answered, Utah can be a contender to get some of these guys. So looking at Mitch Marner, right wing, his salary cap hit in 2023-24 was $10.9 million. And by the July 1st date, he will be 28 years old. So again, kind of peak of his career. Everyone knows Mitch Marner. Even if people don't think he's the exact fit for Utah Hockey Club, I personally think they need someone with a bit more edge. A little bit more pop of a personality, but that's not what you're looking at when you're building a team. That's a personal preference. If you can get Mitch Marner, you're definitely going to talk to him and think about it. He's close to 100 points every season. He's a legitimate goal scorer. He's been on the Toronto Maple Leafs and learned from some of the best players in the league. He's one of the best players in the league. He's struggled in the postseason, and obviously all of the Toronto Maple Leafs had. It's kind of the meme of the league that they can't have playoff success, but I think that's something he thinks about too, and something maybe teams think about when they bring him over. But I imagine Utah will snoop around about Mitch Marner. I don't think he's a lock here. Who knows if that's what they're really looking for, if they want to spend that much of their cap on someone like Mitch Marner. But when a name like that is out there, I think it's something you definitely do your due diligence on. Looking at maybe some more realistic people, Nikolai Ehlers from the Winnipeg Jets this season, 59 points, 22 goals, 37 assists. He's a wing, and his 2023-24 salary cap hit was $6 million. So that's definitely a guy who's not the same caliber of talent as Mitch Marner, but would come in at a lower price tag, and I think could be a good middle six, top six goal scorer for them. Utah, at a lot of times this season, they've just needed to extend the lead. They've needed another goal, and they haven't had that scoring punch that they've needed. That has changed a bit here, but no disrespect to their top six, but I think on a winning playoff team, Michael Carcone is probably in your bottom six, and he's a top six wing right now, and he's helped that line, and Dylan Guenther and Barrett Hayton have played great with him, but I think you just need a bit more of a fortified goal scorer in your top six, and Ehlers can offer that. Like I said, he's on the Winnipeg Jets, he's playing with some of the top guys, has the best record in the NHL with the Washington Capitals, so that's a guy that knows how to win, he knows how to score in big moments, and yeah, I just think Utah needs kind of that game-breaking, back-breaking goal at some times, or not just for their first line to produce. Against the Tampa Bay Lightning, that line of Clayton Keller, Logan Cooley, and Nick Schmaltz, I combined for at least 8 points, and the second line didn't have a single point. That's not indicative of the entire season. Dylan Guenther and Barrett Hayton have carried this team at points as well, but I think you just need a bit more, like I said, scoring punch there, so that could be a good fit. And then, like I mentioned, a center. Centers are one of the hardest positions to get in hockey in the NHL. They're very coveted because kind of make or break a team. Utah has some young centers in the pipeline, none of which will be ready for next season or will have the type of tenure in the league, I think that can make an immediate impact. It'll be more of a learning curve for someone like Cole Baudon or Tisha Ginla, who I know they also want to play the wing. So that's kind of up in the air. But they also have guys like Alex Kerfoot, who's on the wing now but can swing over to center. Jack McBain has played both. Nick Bukestad plays both. Who knows if he'll be with the team next year because he's an unrestricted free agent. So they have a lot of guys that they can slot into center, but I think some are being tasked with performing above where their ceiling may be. I think Barrett Hayton has done a great job this year, but on a Stanley Cup team, he's probably a third-line center or second-line center, which he is right now. So, and Logan Cooley, he's been great as a first-line center, but it can't all be on him. So I think bringing in someone like Sam Bennett, perhaps, from the Florida Panthers. He's 29 years old. Obviously, a center. His 2023-24 salary cap hit was $4.4 million. He has 47 points, 23 goals, 24 assists. Obviously, a Stanley Cup champion. Knows Kevin Stenlund. Stenlund was on that team with him. And Sam Bennett sometimes is a polarizing figure. He famously, last playoffs, sucker punched Brad Marchand in the face, in the head, and Marchand was out with a concussion. Now those two are actually teammates, but Sam Bennett, he's a leader, and he was on Team Canada. He's a big part of that locker room. He's productive on the ice, obviously a playmaker, but the biggest thing that's attractive to me about that type of player is he has snarl. He has an edge to him. He'll fight. He has a type of personality that players don't want to play against. He'll stick up for his teammates. He's pesty. He has that Brad Marchand in him too. So I think Utah could use someone like that. Obviously, Jack McBain fights and Liam O'Brien fights, but Sam Bennett is a legitimate talent center, talent forward who puts up points, but I don't know, has kind of a sandpaper to him that I feel like some of Utah's forwards don't have. Not to say guys aren't tough or putting their heart out there, but they have a lot of talent and flair guys who obviously work hard, but I think Sam Bennett could just add a little spice to the mix. And again, when you talk about veteran leadership, winning experience, that's another guy who's in there. Who knows if Kevin Stenlund talks to him this summer. I know Elliot Friedman reported that Sam Bennett had started talking to the Florida Panthers about a possible extension, but nothing is confirmed now. So he's, as of now, available, and I think that's something that you could probably go for. Obviously, Florida and Utah are two very different places, so we don't know his personal preferences, and none of these are locks at all, but I think that's a player that I would look at. And then this I don't think would really happen, but Brad Marchand, too. He's had a whirlwind of a trade deadline, got traded from the Boston Bruins to the Florida Panthers after more than 10 years with the Bruins. He was their captain, but that's another guy that's just annoying to play against. People call him a rat. And the thing is, it's almost a compliment. So he's not a center, he's a wing, and he's 36, I believe, 37. He doesn't have a ton of years left, and it's probably not worth using $7 million of cap space to bring him in for a year or two, but it's just another interesting name on the market. I think this summer there are a lot of big name players, but also ones where maybe they don't have a lot of time left in the league like Marchand, and you wonder where he wants to finish his career and what type of team that he wants to be a part of. Does he want to go directly to a cup contender? Does he want to be part of something that's building somewhere like Utah? So I think that's probably not a full possibility, but they're just fun names to think about how they would fit into the Utah lineup. And that'll be another fun thing this summer, fun storylines this summer, is seeing how the complexion of Utah's forward group changes. I don't imagine they'll bring in another big name defenseman, maybe a depth defenseman, someone like Nick DeSimone if they don't re-sign him. But again, I talked about it earlier in the podcast, they have a lot of guys they can rely on in the pipeline, and they have their 6 defensemen locked in for next season. So if Utah was to make a big signing this summer, I would see it as someone, a forward, a top 6 forward. Okay, 3 more questions here, or 2 more questions. Is Kess the only player that has a cat? I pulled this one because that was one of the more fun ones that I have a semi-answer to. I don't know if he's the only one that has a cat, but he has 2 cats. He's living with Josh Stone. Him and Josh Stone are roommates, and I put this in a story so people might already read it, but Josh Stone has a dog named Hank, and he's I think he's a something Burmese Shepherd, a big dog. So they've had to figure out how to live with a dog and 2 cats. Josh Stone said Hank grew up on a farm before he adopted him, so he actually loves cats. He has no problem with them. He said Kesslerin's cats are the problem. They don't like Hank. They kind of don't like dogs, so they put up a gate, and the dog, Hank, is allowed on the top floor, and the cats are only allowed on the bottom floor. So I'm not sure if Kessler is the only one that has cats, but he's the only one that has cats that is also living with a dog, and they have to kind of figure out that coexistence. So that's kind of funny. It seems like things have worked out well. It was funny when Josh Stone got called back up from the AHL. I asked Kesslering, have you given him any advice? What did you say to him? And he said, the only thing I told him was he better not leave again, because Kesslering was without a roommate and just with his cats for a few months there when Josh Stone got sent back to the AHL. So those two are definitely very happy to be back together. Cats, dogs, the whole thing. Lastly, which athletes enjoy the publicity they get as a pro athletes? Which ones prefer to be left out of the limelight? In terms of the Utah locker room, I feel like most of the guys are pretty low-key and chill. They're not super flashy about being pro athletes. I think they definitely love sitting courtside at Jazz games. We've talked to a lot of them about that. Clayton Keller, Sean Jersey, Barrett Hayton, Michael Kesslering, Dylan Gunther, Jack McBain. They've all talked about liking the experience of going to those games with Ryan Smith, getting to know the Jazz, just getting a full professional sports experience here in Utah. But those guys are locked in, especially at this time in the season. I don't think anyone's going out to do big celebrity things, doing ads or whatever you may think of it. I think they're just happy to be in Utah, to have an owner with money and who cares, and to have those perks. I think they like flying Delta Charter and like staying in nicer hotels and kind of having the resources they need at their fingertips. So I think those are the things about being a pro athlete that they've really embraced this season, having a nice locker room, having the recovery tools they need, the chef, the nutritionist, all of those things. So that's what I think they've been more focused on this season. I don't know during the summer how that changes, but from my perspective, just being around the team and talking to these guys, they're kind of just all about playing hockey and giving back to the community and being in the community. Everyone, I think, has heard the clips, but they've really liked living in Utah, really like the lifestyle. I think the biggest thing for them is just having an organization that's run professionally and gives them everything they need. So those are the perks that they've kind of had this season. I don't think there's any kind of personalities in that room that are looking for the limelight, if that's what we're saying. And the NHL is kind of like that as well. It's kind of different than the NBA or NFL or other professional sports leagues. Not that players don't have personalities, but I think that's been a struggle of the league for a bit, is that they're superstars like Connor McDavid. If you're not a hockey fan, a lot of people don't know, which like everyone knows LeBron James. So I think that's something that they're trying to advertise more, is the humans behind the hockey players. If people haven't watched it already, Amazon has a series called Face Off. It's great. It goes behind the scenes of 4 to 5 NHL players and goes into their lives during the playoffs last year. They're coming out with a new season of it too. So this kind of goes back to the question of learning the game and getting to know the teams around the league. I highly recommend that series. It's one of my favorite shows I've ever watched, and I think it shows the personality of maybe the bigger stars that are in the limelight a bit more. I think it'd be cool to have a Utah player on that. I think people would get a kick out of like Dylan Gunther going on that show. But yeah, if people haven't watched that, Amazon Face Off, like NHL docuseries, I think that gives you a better look maybe into the benefits and perks that these guys have being in the NHL, but also everything they go through during the season. Okay, that wraps up all of the questions. Thank you everyone for submitting. Again, apologies, this was a solo, more Q&A episode. We'll go back to normal next week. Utah plays the Detroit Red Wings on Monday, which is tomorrow. This will come out on Tuesday, so by the time you're listening to this, you will know how that game turns out. But after that, Utah heads out on a 3-game road trip. They play Tampa and Panthers back-to-back, and then the Chicago Blackhawks. So it's redundant, but that'll be a very important run for this team. They beat Tampa once. We'll see if they can do it again in Tampa's own building. It'll be Mikhail Sergachev's first time going back to Tampa since getting traded this summer. He obviously got his first game against them over with, but this will be his first time back at that arena, in the places he used to live. So I'm sure it'll be an emotional night for him. It seems like a lot of the Tampa fans are excited about that. So that's a storyline to look for. And if you didn't read, the Tribune has a feature story about Sergachev and his time in Tampa and kind of how it's impacted his time in Utah. So if you haven't read that yet, that's a good one to read before this upcoming road trip. I won't be on this road trip, but I'll have coverage from Utah. So that's what's on the docket for Utah Hockey Club. We'll have a new Inside the Club episode next Tuesday. Thank you guys so much for listening, and I'll talk to you next week.